there are several people from other traditions that I've cultivated friendships with that have been very meaningful for me. One of them, for instance, Sister Marianne Farina, who's a Catholic nun, and just has been an incredible help, and somebody who's over the years, we've had really a wonderful relationship. The same is true for, I've had Buddhist friends, I've had Hindu friends, I've had Jewish friends. We have a rabbi in the area that I've been associated with for a long time. So I think for me, it's very important for us within the religious traditions, especially people that have the tribulation of leadership, is to have good relations with other people, because if the leaders have good relationships with other faith communities, then it sets the standard for the people that look up to them. Whereas if they're denouncing, if they're attacking or criticizing other religious traditions, which very often happens in that type of populist approach to religion, the demagogues amongst the religious people, that ends up having a very corrosive effect on people's hearts and their inability to see other religions as having every right to be here. The great poet Hafiz said, if you knew that the whole world was a divine banquet and everybody had the same invitation from the Creator, how would you treat the other guests at the banquet? Well, one of the most influential people in my personal journey has been Imam al-Ghazali, and he has the concept of the wayfarer, that every human being is really a wayfarer. One of my favorite people in the modern period is Edith Stein, who said that anyone who is actively searching for the truth is actively searching for God, whether consciously or unconsciously. And that's actually a Ghazalian perspective. Imam al-Ghazali said that everybody who is searching for the truth, whether they find it before they die or not, will be saved. Because that is the purpose, really, of life, is to set out on this journey. And it's an epic journey. It has all of the trials and tribulations that go with the epic journey. So each one of us should see ourselves on this heroic journey. And we have to slay the dragons within ourselves, and sometimes the dragons out there. But if we don't slay the dragons within ourselves, we'll never be able to slay the dragons out there. We'll end up doing far more damage than good. I think in the time we're living in today, I actually think it's become absolutely necessary for the average person to have knowledge of the major religious elements that human beings share on this planet. 23% of the world is Muslim. About 25 or 26% is Christian or has some identification with Christianity. Judaism has a very, very important and powerful role in the world, and also in the evolution of our religious traditions. Buddhism, the Asian religions, also Hinduism, over 1 billion Hindus, Buddhism, over 1 billion Buddhists. These are large numbers of people, and we should have a basic understanding. We obviously can't learn all the religions. There are many animistic traditions. There are many mythological traditions that are also important if we want to know literature or understand things. But knowing religious traditions now, for me, I think, is something that we have to take very seriously, and we have to know the basic beliefs of other peoples. It's very important, for instance, to know that Islam does not accept terrorism. Even Bernard Lewis argued that as a Jewish scholar of Islam, that Islam does not sanction terrorism. It's important to know that it's not from the religion. It's important to know that the concept of the chosen people in the Jewish tradition is not a sense of superiority, although it might be misunderstood in that way, but it was actually a sense of moral responsibility on the people, and something that the Quran actually mentions. It's important to know that in Christianity, that the Crusades or the Inquisition, that these things, in the true understanding of the great saints of Christianity, are unacceptable. That our religious traditions cannot be defined by the horrors and the atrocities of our religious traditions. They have to be defined by the saints and by the scholars and sages of these traditions. First and foremost, I think if there was one hallmark that I would see about all of our religious traditions, that they are very real attempts at enabling human beings to live life on earth without falling into a nihilistic despair that comes from a type of meaninglessness. And one of the hallmarks of modern society is increasingly despair, anxiety, angst about just being alive is spreading. And that's why we have, for instance, in my country, an opioid crisis right now. And so I think that's one of the most important things, is that religion answers those huge questions that all of us face as individuals. Who am I? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do while I'm here? Where did I come from and where am I going? I mean, these are the fundamental human questions that will never go away. And religions provide very profound, very subtle, often very sophisticated answers. Sometimes, in order to really penetrate their mysteries, one has to spend a great deal of time, which is why the great sages of all of our religious traditions spent years of training to really understand the answers to these fundamental questions at a deep and profound way. And often the power that they had was in their presence and how they were exemplars of the answers in their own personal being. And that's why I think more than ever, the world needs sanctified souls. It needs the Tzaddik in the Jewish tradition. It needs the Sannyasa. It needs the Bodhisattva. It needs the Wali. It needs the saint in the Christian tradition, the Wali in the Islamic tradition. We need these more exemplars of these religious traditions, because religion is not the problem. Religion, as it's rightly understood, is very often the solution to a lot of the problems that we share. And I think Jonathan Swift said it best when he said, we have enough religion to hate one another, but not enough to love one another. There's a great deal of truth in that statement. I think that the differences that we have in our traditions, they can be an obstacle, but they can also be something that sparks in the other insights about his or her own tradition. So they don't necessarily have to be obstacles. One of the interesting things about dialectic is that when you have two people that are in discourse with one another from different perspectives or different viewpoints, very often they're enlightened by that experience of engaging the other. They can have insights that they would not have had they not been challenged in their own thinking. And if it's a mutual pursuit of the truth, then it's extremely fruitful. If it's just being entrenched in one's own opinions, then very often it doesn't. It's just like two football teams. It doesn't matter who wins. The fans are going to stick with their team. So I think that there can be a great deal of benefit from just interacting in those differences and looking at those differences. I think that it's important for us to share, first of all, each one of our religions makes claims. Either those claims are true or they're not true, but each one of them makes claims. And it's very important for us to acknowledge that most of us have inherited these claims, that we actually have not done the type of soul searching to find the truth. We simply inherited something and then we're entrenched in that position. And so I think we're at a time when a lot of that's breaking down, especially for young people. And so with postmodernity, this idea that there's no meta-narratives, there's the idea that everybody has their own truth with a small case T and not a capital T, I think is a great challenge for our religious traditions. And I think that if we're honest with each other and with ourselves, that we're going to be increasingly confronted with that reality as time goes on. Part of the message is that we are up against a tsunami of materialism, of atheism, and these people are becoming increasingly convincing for a lot of people because there's so much trouble in the religious communities. And so instead of seeing that we're natural allies, because the fundamental understanding of religious people is that life is not just material, it's not just quantitative, it's also qualitative. That both elements are working in our very human nature that has a body and has a soul. That just that acceptance, whether you're Jewish, whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, Buddhist, or Hindu, all of our major religions all accept that premise, that there is a spiritual dimension to the human being that is actually the single most important dimension to our being. And that if we ignore that to our soul's peril and to our well-being, our ability to flourish as human beings. So I think our natural alliances should really be recognized and should be highlighted and should be pursued. One of the things in the Islamic tradition, when the rain is withheld, we're supposed to do a communal prayer, and the Christians and the Jews are also encouraged to come out with the Muslims and pray with them, because all of us suffer when rain is withheld from us. And I think I've argued that in our current crisis right now, we should really have the attitude of Daniel. Daniel's prayer is an extraordinary prayer where one just puts on the sackcloth and the ash and recognizes that we really need God's redemptive help, and that we are in crisis. Our globe is in incredible crisis right now. It's in many ways unprecedented in our history, what we know of our history. We've been through horrible periods, and this certainly is not the worst period that we've been through as a species, but what we're facing in terms of our environmental crises, in terms of our social crises, our civil crises, all of these things, we need help. And prayer is certainly a source of that help and a solace, if nothing else. It's a type of solace that enables people to deal with the problems that they have. I mean, I always smile when I hear people quote Marx that religion is the opiate of the opium of the masses, because that quote's always taken out of context. He said it was the sigh of the oppressed. It was the heart of a heartless world. It was the opium of the masses. In other words, it numbed their pain to deal with the incredible difficulties of the world. So instead of giving people the pain-numbing opium of religion, now people are given real opium as an alternative. And so I think Marx's solution is, let's make the world a paradise, which is the utopian fantasy. The world is what it is. It's always been like this. It doesn't mean we don't work to make it better, but we also have to be realistic and understand. And the most dangerous people on this planet have always been people that are pursuing utopia on Earth. It was never meant to be that way. It was designed to do exactly what it's doing, to drive us to God. And if it doesn't drive you to drink, or to God, then I don't think you're human. I think absolutely. The Quran says, "Ta'awun 'ala al-birri wa taqwa," cooperate in goodness and in piety. And that verse was revealed to the Muslims to work with other people. It wasn't about Muslims cooperating, it was actually cooperating with other people. And that's why the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, I was called to an alliance of virtue in the pre-Islamic period. Had I been called to it in Islam, I would have answered. In other words, from other people. And so it's very important for religious peoples to have alliances of virtue, especially right now when so many of our fundamental and core values are being questioned by the modern world. Families breaking down. We all share family. All of our religious traditions put a very strong focus on family and on the importance of marriage, on the importance of knowing your biological parents, on the importance of inculcating virtue in our young people. So those are all things that I think we share. One of the intriguing aspects of the three Abrahamic faiths is that the foundation of their ethics was the Hellenistic Nicomachean ethics. All three of our great Abrahamic traditions use that as a basis for their moral philosophy, and I think it's fascinating that that isn't highlighted today, because it's the basis of it is moral virtue of working to perfect the soul. Like I said, I think that our religions are in crises. Our planet's in crisis. Many people are experiencing crises. And I think it's really a time for religions to be advancing something for the common weal, for the common good. I think too much of religious discourse right now deals with attacking the other. And I think it's very important for the religions and the people that have the burden of religious leadership to be bringing forth from their own traditions positive solutions to a lot of what people are facing today.